KFBK ran ABC, right? ABC network.
Yeah, eventually, and for a while, it has changed from time to time.
Yeah. And that leads into the Rush Limbaugh story because he was picked up by like the former ABC head of ABC radio network. That was Ed McLaughlin, right?
Yeah.
And do you know much about Ed? Because he's the one who discovered Rush Limbaugh from KFBK.
Well, Ed was introduced to Rush Limbaugh.
Okay.
A fellow by the name of Bruce Marr, who was a wonderful, wonderful guy, great program director in his own right, became a wonderful consultant. He was involved with KFBK when I was the program director there. He was actually the one that gave me the very strong advice that I just give up the programming job and just stick with doing the morning show. Not because I was doing a lousy job of programming, but just because it didn't make any sense for me to do both. So anyway, already told that. Yes, Bruce Marr. I don't know if Bruce was involved in Rush's hiring at KFBK. Rush came along about a year or two before I did at KFBK.
Yeah, he started in '84 and you came on in '85, right?
Right. So, and then Rush left to go to New York after McLaughlin hired him in '88. And I know that for a fact because he came to my wedding in June of '88. And the next day he was gone. I mean, it wasn't like he was a surprise. We knew it, but it was the last thing he did before leaving town was to come to our wedding. And the rest, as they say, is history.
So what was it like working with Rush Limbaugh before he became a nationally syndicated personality?
KFBK was his first talk show. And what it was, he was completely different than anybody who had ever done talk. When I was program director, I took Rush to lunch one day, and we were friends. We got along very, very well. We actually hung out a little bit together, and we did some socializing. Not like we're best friends, but close enough. And I took him to lunch one day, and I said, "Look, okay, this is the program director talking to you." I said, "I'm not going to tell you what to do with your show. It's your show. You do it, and you're doing great, and people love you. People also hate you." But I said, here's the only thing I will advise you. If you don't find something to talk about besides national politics and the Russians, your career is going to go right down the toilet. That was my big advice. 20 years later, he thanked me for not telling him what to do, letting him make that decision on his own. But at that time, nobody in local radio was talking about national issues, and there was no national talk. There was no syndication. There was no satellite. Nothing like that. Satellite came along very shortly after that, but it was Dr. Ruth Westheimer with Sex Talk, or Dr.
Larry
Laura
King.
with it was shrink stuff for the most part.
Yeah.
But working with Rush was a real treat. The guy was great. He was a great, great human being. And I know there are a lot of people that don't want to hear that and just don't believe it and won't believe it. And I say to those people, okay, you're absolutely welcome to think about what you thought, what you heard on the radio. If you hated his politics, you hated the way he talked, you hated the offensive things he said, I understand that. And you have a right to that opinion. But what you don't know is him personally, why he did those things the way he did them, and how it served him very, very well. And the fact is that if you were to meet the guy in person, I never met anybody who met Rush Limbaugh in person who didn't say, you know what, that guy is really a nice guy, isn't he? He really is. And he
so why was he different on the air, or how would you characterize who he was on the air versus who he was in off the air?
What he was the same guy on the air, except for two different things. One is that he was much bigger than life. That's kind of
radio does that.
Yeah, right. You get bigger than you go out of yourself. You make it bigger. And the other thing was that he didn't talk about that stuff all the time. He was interested in sports and TV shows and the same stuff that we're all interested in.
Didn't he really want to be a sportscaster?
I don't know for sure. I wouldn't be surprised. He did work for the Kansas City Royals.
Yeah, Royals.
Yeah, he was doing public relations for him. I think that was just before he came to Sacramento. And he was the same guy, but if you met him in a social setting, I had him over to my house a couple, 3 times for little gatherings or big parties and stuff. And eventually, I'd look around the room and go, "What happened to Rush?" He's sitting over there in the corner with a drink, very very quietly by himself. He was something of a wallflower at that point in his life, and people weren't hovering around him the way they did eventually. But anybody who did approach him and start talking to him about his show or about politics, he would engage them. He was very polite. He was very friendly. He was open-minded. He was listening to what they said. But on the talk, it was his show. He was, so he did it his way.
So did he set the boundaries for his show, or did you set certain parameters for him?
I don't know that he had any boundaries. I certainly didn't set them.
So knowing that he became like the highest paid person in radio, like he had a $70 million contract at I guess toward the end.
Allegedly, yeah.
Could you have followed that path?
No. Excuse me. No, because that's not who I am. And besides that, Rush broke the mold. Rush Limbaugh was created, and that was it. That was the only one. There were a lot of people that tried to copy him.
Yeah, long list.
But that's
radio.
That's the essence of being a star in any industry. It's the essence of being a movie star or a great musical artist, is that you're so unique, that you're unlike anybody that's ever been seen or heard before. And that's what makes Rush Limbaugh Rush Limbaugh. And nobody else could be Rush Limbaugh. Be kind of like him. And I couldn't do it because I just don't have the appetite for politics or even news, for that matter.
Do you prefer engaging with your audience in a way that's more down to earth, like not so extreme and emotional?
Yeah, I'm just being who I am. I really am.
Kitty O'Neill, a radio star here in Sacramento for many, many years at KFBK. That's 1530 AM and also 93 FM.
93.1 FM.
Yeah. And so more people listen to the AM than the FM, right?
They used to. I don't know what the difference is now, but a lot of people stream it. A lot of people on the app. It's kind of changed. But yeah, it was primarily on AM for a long time.
Much into that. Let's talk about your radio career a little bit here.
Sure.
That's how a lot of people know you.
I know.
Doing the afternoon news show on KFBK from 4 to 7 p.m. You used to have a different shift on a different station, but same owner, I think. You were on KAER for a while.
First started there years ago. Oh my gosh, is that 80s or 90s? Early?
Yeah, that became Y92, but at one time it was the CARE.
Yeah.
I had this printout from TV Times. I'll show a better version of it. But you're on here.
That's hilarious.
What I noticed on here, this lists all the full-time radio people on here for the week, and then it has weekenders on another column. But I did a little survey of my own. I know you like doing polls on your show. But I did a poll on how many of these full-time people on here are men and how many are women. And what I came up with, this is 1986.
Yeah.
And out of 77 people listed for full-timers in Sacramento on this thing, 10 were women. Okay,
Yeah.
you were one of them,
Yeah.
and you probably know about probably all the others, maybe. But I'm just curious, getting into radio at that time, like you started what in '84?
Oh yeah, I guess that would have been about right. Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, I started in Sacramento radio at '84 as well, and so did Rush Limbaugh, like December '84, I think. And you answered phones for him, or what exactly did you do for him?
Yeah, I was so I worked at both of those stations. I was the producer, they called it producer for the KFBK talk show, and whoever that happened to be in that slot. Well, it happened to be Rush Limbaugh at one point, and he came in, and so yeah, I worked with him for however long he
Wait,
was
first
here.
you worked for Morton Downey Jr. till he got fired, right?
You have done your homework. Yeah, I Downey Jr.
So
Absolutely.
both of those guys were two of the most controversial radio and TV people of all time, but of that era
Yeah.
particularly.
No,
They got rid of the
what is
fairness.
this I'm doing here?
I mean, the
Yeah.
FCC got rid of the fairness doctrine, and next thing you know, they were like shock jocks. There was like Howard Stern and Rush
Yeah.
Limbaugh and those kind of people. I'm just curious. Well, how did you feel about that? Getting into that when, say, like when I got into radio, they taught me everything that those guys broke. That they broke the rules of what I was taught, and I was taught don't talk about politics or religion, and don't insult your audience, and blah blah blah. And then these guys come in and they're doing that, and they're making more money than I'll ever see in my life. And that was the way to win in radio, apparently, starting with those guys. I mean, how did you fit into that? What was your mindset?
Well, I had studied communications at Sac State, but I didn't study, being on the air on radio. So I really didn't have any kind of preconceived ideas about what that was supposed to be like. I was, more into content and, verbal expression and that kind of thing. I mean, I didn't know the rules of radio. So when those guys came in, man, I thought this is crazy. These
What was
guys, the
kind
hook.
of wild compared to everything else on the dial, right?
Totally. I mean, on that station on KPK, as I recall, it was like Sally, Jesse, Raphael,
Yeah.
and
Was that
and
syndicated?
Larry King. Yeah, and Larry
Yeah.
King. It was those guys, and so I thought, oh, all right, let's interview guys. And then we had Morton Downey Jr., who just kind of just went off, on people, and
Yeah.
hey, this is weird. And then, but I said, I guess this is how they do it, So then Rush Limbaugh comes in, and he was even more unique than Morton Downey Jr. I mean, he did all kinds of things. You talk about breaking rules, Alex, like he'd have paper and he goes, I have a piece of paper here, and like making the sound effect, and it was, you weren't supposed to do. And then someone would come in the room and he'd go, hey, Linda, what are you doing? I mean, he talked people off, breaking all the rules of
Oh, yeah.
people that you,
Well, the audience becomes the third party.
exactly, totally different. And so because I was so young and inexperienced in radio, I thought it was kind of crazy, but I really didn't understand, I guess, at the time how unique it was. And I think,
Wasn't Rush the first guy to let you on the air?
yes. And, it's funny that you bring that up because that is how I actually got into radio because the boss at the time, he would hear me on Rush's show. So one April Fool's Day, he said, okay, Kitty, you are going to do the show and Rush is going to screen your calls. And you're going to do it for half an hour on April Fool's Day. I thought, okay, I'm up for that. I'll try that. So we did that. And I did not realize that was my audition to be on the air. He was auditioning me just to see how I'd do. I guess I passed. And so he put me on the FM in the morning, the one you referenced earlier, KAER. And so what I would do is do the morning shift on KAER, then KGBY with Paul and Phil. And then I'd go over across the hall and produce Rush's show.
Okay. As far as
So that's kind of how.
And as a producer, what did you operate the board or answer phones, or what did you do?
I answered phones and, just took care of anything that he needed, commercial wise or anything like that. I mean, the other people, like before Martin Downey would have guests, and so I would help facilitate that. But Rush didn't want any guests.
Because
Really? Well, like, you don't want
it
guests?
was his show.
He's like, nope, no guests. I'm like, well, okay.
I saw him in an interview. I don't want to talk about him all day. I want to talk about you, but just a few things about him. First of all, I didn't agree with any of his politics. I was way on the other side of the spectrum. But I learned one thing from him, and that is from an interview, he said, if you're going to put callers on the air, don't let them take over the show. It's your show. Did he ever tell you that?
Oh yeah, and he would tell me, sometimes I hate to say this, but if somebody like was like really old or the accent was too thick and it was hard for people to understand, he'd say, maybe not. So I'd be
Right.
like,
Still thinking of the audience. Can the audience hear this and know what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, that was what it was for. That was the reasoning behind it. I mean, you can read into that what you want, but frankly, it was because he'd say the callers, are part of the show, and they're tools for the show. That doesn't revolve around the caller, revolves around me. This is Rush speaking. He said, so, when you have a caller on, they're part of the show, but they just within their framework, like you said, they don't take over the show. They, have to be controlled. They have to be cut off at the right time. So, he had his whole vision of the kind of show he wanted. So that's, what I tried to do in my job.
Well, I think, would you say that by the time, he became a network star across America, was that a different show than what he did at KFBK?
Yeah. When he started at KFBK, he was really silly and would do a lot of morning jock stuff, like
pop culture.
Yeah, pop culture, pulling in music all the time.
Hey, speaking of that, he used the Pretenders theme. My City Was Gone. It's his theme song. Did he do that at KFBK? I know he did that on the network, but
he did it.
Oh, okay, that's where it started. Okay. And that would be the
what's really
one thing I would dig about his show. I love that theme song,
I know. I used to sing that song, My City Was Gone. I used to sing that when I was in the band, which was hilarious, and he'd play it. And I was at the Clinton presidential inaugural, whatever year that was.
93.
Okay, and I saw Chrissie Hynde there, and I asked her, I said, what do you think of Rush Limbaugh using your song as the intro? And she feigned ignorance. She's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, what I'm talking about. But I thought, okay, she didn't. I think I think secretly she liked it.
Well, what I heard originally, this is what it says in Wikipedia, I guess, is that at first she despised that fact. She didn't like his politics. But then because her dad loved Rush Limbaugh and he listened to him all the time, she figured that's the only way her dad's going to hear her music is on his show.
Well, that's a good story. But yeah, I mean, I you know what I mean? I think it's probably true. I mean, I think she didn't like Rush's politics, but she must have liked the exposure that she got on that show too.
Yeah, KFBK. When did you start doing afternoons at KFBK?
I was about 7 years in when I started. So what would that be? Early 90s,
Okay.
Early mid-90s.
So Dave Williams and Amy Lewis were in the morning. I would listen to them sometimes.
Yeah.
On my way. I did middays. I was up against Rush Limbaugh.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, my mom loved Rush Limbaugh, but she loved me too. So she listened to both of us. I came on at 10. So she listened to him from 9 to 10, then me till 2 p.m. But or so the story goes. She might have heard his whole show, then flipped to me, but she loved Rush Limbaugh because she was a homemaker and she was against the women's movement, and she liked how he was against the women's movement. Or was he? I mean, what was his position on women in the workplace?
I always like a lot of what he did was for effect and was kind of fabricated for fun and to get listeners. And
Okay, entertainment.
I don't think he believed all that, but
He's a sports guy more, right?
yeah, but as things evolved for him, and he became the spokesperson for conservatives. I mean, I don't think he meant to do that, but kind of what happened.
Yeah.
And so then he kind of took it more seriously.
Right.
And he had to take it really seriously when he went national.
Yeah.
So I think then he became, more dedicated to that point of view. But I think he started just in fun. I really do.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of what Dave Williams said when I interviewed him. That Dave didn't put any restraints on him. He just let him do a show when Dave was program director.
Yeah.
So
Well,
the show was whatever Rush wanted it to be, apparently.
Yeah, because he, love him or hate him, he was a big talent. He knew what he was doing, clearly. I mean, look at what he did. He changed radio and, made millions of dollars.
But
But
was the highest paid guy in radio history,
Mhm.
if you don't count Howard Stern, and I sometimes don't count Howard Stern because he was on Sirius.
Right.
But they were both like shock jocks in a way.
Yeah.
But you're not a shock jock. You're more like you have that community spirit to you where you're talking on a friendly conversational style. I listened to your whole show on Monday right after the Super Bowl. Thought it was a great show. Is either foreground or background. Like, in other words, I was doing stuff while I was listening. And either way, you just have a really nice mood and atmosphere that you create for your show, I think.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's, it's kind of where my heart is. I'm big in this advocate for this community, and I want to use my, air opportunity for good. And I want to help and advance people with good causes. And it's my own feeling, Alex. I know we're in a time when people like their news delivered with a point of view. I know that sounds weird, but I think it's true. I think that's what people want now, which is why you have stations that absolutely have point of views like CNN and MSNBC and Fox News.
Yeah, but didn't they also start this war between, both sides of our culture, if you want to consider it, say, like a two-party system, even though I'm not part of either of those parties. I stand back and look at these people fighting, like throwing insults at each other and not getting anything done out of that.
Yeah, I don't like it. It's not me. And so I try to deliver the news, as straightforward as I can, and not comment on it, and really show my hand. I'd rather people kind of guess where I am politically. But that's me. It's old school journalism, right?